Welcome to the Deer Society podcast. Here's your host, Brian Lemke.
Yeah, this is who I am. Well, I'm a deer hunting man.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deer Society podcast. I'm Brian Lemke and joined again, as always, JJ Ducart and Mr. Mike Ducart. We are here. Fall is kicking. We are approaching the most exciting time of the year, which is pre-rut coming up just around the corner. Temps are changing. I feel like I say it every week that we're getting more and more excited, but this is like go time coming up here. So we are pumped. What's going on, guys?
Weather's finally breaking. We had some storms this morning. It's been just so warm. And our last podcast was where are all the big bucks? And we found a couple. So they're starting to show up. Crops are getting cut. And we're just thinking of, what are the strategies coming up that we can implement soon? Pre-rut. We're just coming out of this October lull that people call. But yeah, weather's looking good and we're ready to get into a tree.
Yeah.
Some of us are. Some of us are.
Yeah, well, I was going to go there. On my side, I had to take a trip to North Dakota last week and was there over the weekend. And on the way back, I noticed that there's a lot of crops coming out. I mean, a lot of crops. They're hitting the corn hard. And typically here in Minnesota, in the upper Midwest, right now the beans should be pretty much out. And now they're hitting the corn, and they're hitting the corn pretty hard. So that's kind of where that sits. And then, of course, we left the day early from Dakota because there was some bad weather coming in. And I looked on Facebook yesterday, and I saw there was like 4 or 5 inches of snow in South Dakota, and we were going to kind of take that lower route back. So I'm glad we did leave early. So that got me thinking a little bit. And so then I watched the weather last night, and I saw that we are going to be a steady 50s and 60s and dipping down into the 40s and even 30s over the next week or two. And then, of course, we're monitoring our trail cameras, our Tacticams, and yeah, almost like we knew what we were talking about, JJ. The big bucks started to show up. It was within 2 days after we ended the podcast that it started. And yeah, it's a social thing, like we talked about too. They were coming in, you could tell they were laying out their scent, they're staking out these areas, they're licking the branches, doing the scrapes, doing the rubs, and getting fired up to go hunting. Unfortunately, I'm feeling better, but I did kind of a practice golf swing to see how my leg was in shape, and I couldn't follow through, so I don't think I'm quite ready to hit a tree stand yet.
Well, hopefully healing up sooner than later. But yeah, so kind of theme of this podcast is we found the big bucks to a sense, to a point. We found a couple, not all of them, obviously. But, last week, just a week ago, we sat here and the theme was, where are the big bucks? Because, they weren't really showing up on camera. It was different. The weather was warm. We were a week earlier. And it's interesting to look at how much can change in just a short week. Now, we have pictures on our reveals of some really good deer that have moved in that we haven't seen yet before this year, before now. So, getting into that exciting time. So we're going to be talking about that, going to be talking about where these bucks are showing up, and going to be talking about what our tactics are starting now and moving forward, and what we're looking to do and accomplish and strategize for the next couple weeks as we move into the pre-rut and then the rut. Let's kick it off, Mike. I want to talk about something that you brought up right away, and that is crops coming off, right? So what are your guys' thoughts? What does that change now that corn especially is coming off? How do you approach that? What changes?
Well, to me, when it comes to corn, the beans, first of all, they're on them early when they're green, and then they start to turn, and they'll still be around the beans a little bit, but as the beans turn, they move to the acorns. So we kind of know that happens around here. That migration happened, but the corn, we still weren't seeing any bucks. So that's cover. And they don't need to build up a ton of fat right now because the corn is such a heavy carbohydrate. And so they don't need to do that. That doesn't mean they don't. I mean, I eat ice cream and cookies, too. when I shouldn't, but when you really need is when that cold kicks in, and you start craving comfort food and things like that, and that's when they'll start going more heavily to the corn, I think. So I think it's more of a cover thing than anything. I think bringing that corn out is going to get these deer moving. I think they get the same urges and feelings we do. All of a sudden it starts to get fall. You see the first flocks of geese come over. Now I saw migrating geese come over, and I'm getting a little more excited. Now the cooler weather's coming in. The grass doesn't have to be mowed as much. The crops are coming out. I'm getting fired up. I mean, it's instinctive. And I think that's starting to happen to them as well. But yeah, it's cover, in my opinion, is a big part of the corn coming out. You'll start seeing them.
Yeah, and this year specifically, we have a ton of corn around, and I think that's just a market thing, prices. So yeah, there's just a lot of areas for these deer to hide, and they're starting to take the corn out, but there's still just acres and acres and acres and acres of standing corn. So I think there's still a lot of bucks just kind of hiding out in these little draws and little, woods surrounded by standing corn. Another interesting thing too, I feel like they're harvesting it a little bit early this year, and maybe it's because they do have so much corn compared to beans. But with that drought, I've seen some farmers post that they're having really dry corn. Humidity rates are real low, so they're taking it out early. I don't know if the corn matured early too with the drought, but
it seems like it did.
Yeah, so kind of a different scenario. Normally you see that 50-50 corn bean rotation or some type of rotation. I think it's like 80% corn, so probably another reason why we haven't seen as many bucks earlier in the year due to that. And then as they take it out, I think they're just going to hit it hard. We got a little bit of rain, but after that dries out, and the next day we got a lot of wind, and that'll dry the corn right back out, and then farmers will get back after it, and they'll be hitting it for the next 2-3 weeks and pushing a lot of deer around, along with hunters getting after it pretty hard. I know you got some trail camera pictures last night you could bring up, but of some hunters trailing deer through your property. So a lot of pressure out there by people that are hunting in less than ideal situations probably, and corn coming out, and it's all leading right into that pre-rut time period. So things are going to kick in, cold weather this weekend, and I'm going to try to get my first sit in.
Yeah, before we leave that corn coming off subject, I think we can all agree that corn is definitely is a cover source for these deer. Corn comes out, less cover, bucks are moving around. I think it's a trigger for them, like you said, Mike, too. And it's just process of elimination. They have less cover to move around in. So I think that really can cause you to start to see some of those bucks that you haven't seen all summer long. Second question I kind of have for you, and JJ, I ask you this. So you got a hunting property and farmers taking your corn off. How do you feel about when you should go in there and hunt that? Is it something that you're going to jump on right away? Are you going to try to wait? How are you going to approach that from a hunting standpoint? If you have corn close to your corn, you can hunt around the farmers taking off.
Yeah, up until we actually owned our own land, didn't really have to worry about that. I know in Wisconsin where I hunt, we've had some corn crop, but I don't live there. I'm 2 hours away, so I don't get a chance to time my hunts based on that harvest or anything. So I would say this year when the corn comes out, it's going to kind of mess up some of the access routes we have planned, going in with that nice side cover. How's it going to impact the deer? I don't really know. I don't really know what to think. I guess it's a learning thing this year for me.
Yeah, I mean, just through all the years that I've hunted and gun hunt, bow hunt, corn. There's a couple things. I mean, I've actually hunted a cornfield bow hunting, stalked it, and I've done that before, and walked up on a big old buck. Back in the day, to me it was a big buck, and got pulled back on it. And he was facing the other way. That was a heck of a hunt. Talk about like exciting, And I got within like 20 yards, and I kind of dipped over into the row that he was in, and his head was turned the other way. And then all of a sudden he kind of turned back and looked at me. I got pulled back, and I figured as soon as he makes that little kind of stand up, I'm going to put it right, through the, the Boilermaker. And sure as heck, I hit a corn stalk and deflected the arrow off, and I never got the deer. But so deer sitting in the corn. How does it affect it? I also sat in a stand, and then all of a sudden the farmer starts picking the corn. I'm like, oh man, what a bummer that is. But that's going to get the deer moving too, you know. Now, that's going to get the deer flying out of there, but it is going to get the deer moving. I personally haven't had a close encounter with a deer when a farmer was picking corn in close proximity. But I've seen deer take off out of cornfields when a farmer was picking, you know, driving around and things like that as well. The very first deer I ever shot with a bow, and this is when I was hardcore waterfowl hunter, was because I had a set of pits, and I was a goose guide. I had my own service, and they picked the cornfield, and there was a little bit of timber next to it. It was the same farmer, so I could hunt that as well. And right after they picked it, the deer were just, boom, they were right there. They were coming out into this picked corn within a day. And so that created a pattern. They were out there milling and getting into the corn right away. So I thought, I'm going to go bow hunt, try this. So I went out to the archery store and I got me a Fred Bear, and it had one pin on it, and, you know, the finger things and the old aluminum arrows. And, you know, unfortunately, I got in the stand, and this big old doe came out and stood broadside, and I nailed her. And I will never forget that feeling of that first shot and the sound of a double lung shot with that big old heavy arrow, and watching what happened. It just was such an adrenaline rush, and it was just such a crazy experience, and it got me hooked. And that's why I said unfortunately. So I drifted from waterfowl to whitetail, and I haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. Well, I that's interesting that you say that, because I have had the opportunity to hunt, I guess, quite a few different farms where, you know, corn comes off and then get to see what happens after that. And I think we can all attest to it and see it, you know, driving around and things like that. But, you know, I think it's a real opportunity that us as hunters can take advantage of when they first pick that corn. I've actually had times where, you know, farmer comes along and they're going to combine the corn, and you're like, man, I shouldn't go sit there. But if they get done picking at a decent time, I think almost that combine, in certain cases, the deer hear that, you know, one, they're curious, two, they can smell that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like you said, the day after, those deer are flocking there. I've even seen them flock there that evening. I think those first days after, you know, a new cornfield gets picked, there's going to be a lot of deer on it. So I think that's something that you can key in on. Now that time is short. You know, I think that, you know, a lot of farmers will come in and they'll till that ground up right away. It's different if they're chopping the corn. You know, probably not as effective as when they're picking it. You know, I don't see as many deer in a chopped cornfield as, you know, when a cornfield's completely picked. But if you can take advantage of that time when, especially if you get a cold front, deer wanting to feed, you know, after the farmer picks that corn, get in there and hunt, because you will see a lot of deer on a newly, freshly picked cornfield before they till it under, if they're going to till it under. You know, I think there's two ways to look at that. One, if you got one close, pay attention to that. Two, pay attention to your neighbors too. You know, if you have a lot of deer activity and then your neighbors, you know, corn gets picked on your neighbors and you're wondering where your deer went, you know, maybe use that to your advantage too, and think about that. They might be over in the neighbor's picked cornfield and taking advantage of that stand that just got picked too.
Yeah, and I think that goes the opposite way too. So it depends on the lay of the land. So there's this big old cornfield out on the neighbors, and it's in the wide open. You know what I mean? But you got timber. So they pick that cornfield, they lose that cover. Now them deer may start to migrate into your area as well. So I think that can go both ways. I think you're going to start seeing deer that you hadn't seen before. And I'm thinking more on the lines of bucks than does. I mean, the does are, you know, I could see them hanging and hitting them new freshly cut cornfields and feeding in them pretty steadily. Where I think the bucks are losing the cover and they're trying to stake out territory now. They're kind of social. Not that they're not eating, but I don't think it's their top priority at this point.
Yeah, I kind of look at a couple of things. So first, we released a hunt breakdown 2 weeks ago where Dan Kaufman, it's called the 1 Acre 180, and he actually harvested that buck out of just a small patch of woods the day after the farmer started harvesting and then stopped. So he took advantage of that small little chunk of woods before, you know, all the corn was gone and the cover was gone and the buck would have probably left. But as you guys were talking, I'm just thinking, you know, with the corn up, it's kind of interesting because it creates more pinch points and more defined movement. like where I actually hung a stand this morning where there was a lot of rubs right along the edge of a cornfield. And it's because the cornfield's standing. Now, if you think about when that corn's out, that deer could be anywhere in that whole 30-acre stretch. So it kind of just releases the pinch on where they travel, but then it also, it's just a bunch of stuff happens because then they lose the cover, and then they should be in your timber instead of out in the field. So then, you should have more hunting opportunities in the woods. But yeah, it's just a lot of stuff going on. It's just interesting. Try to wrap your head around that.
Yeah, I'll tell you just the way that I'm going to approach a certain situation on one of my farms right now. I have, two really good deer that are coming into this one spot, and it's an inside corner, and it's standing corn out in this big field. So they're pinching down, and they're coming out right in this one spot, and that corn is pinching them down and forcing them to come right through that corner. Now, I think that there's kind of a ticking clock because I don't know that those deer will continue to do that right in that spot after the corn's picked. Now, I do think that like the first day that corn's picked, I'm going to be there because I think that those deer naturally, because they've been doing it for so long here, like that's their pattern. And I think that they'll come out there, especially with the corn picked. I think they'll still come out there. But days after that, if you get a week, 2 weeks after that, great point. The deer don't have to necessarily pinch down right in that spot anymore. So it creates another variable. They can come out 100 yards away, still get to the same destination, but they don't have to go through that big cornfield. So, I think that there's definitely positives, definitely negatives to the corn coming off. I think more positives than negative. Take away some of that cover, force the deer to go find new cover. You get some deer moving around.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, on a scenario like that, I mean, I look at it, once again, both ways, just like you guys do. Once that corn comes out of it, it depends on the topographic that you got. We're in a position where the one piece of property is, whitetails from scratch property, is surrounded by crop. So when that crop comes out, we have the inside out property. In other words, the deer love the bedding and everything on the inside of the property. They'll go out toward the food. Okay, that's the meaning of that. If you're an outside in property, that means that you might have that bigger open outside edge of the property that you can hunt, but they're going into that timber. So when that corn comes out, that's their cover. When the corn is there, that's their cover and the timber's their cover. So it's a weird dynamic. So if the corn's all out, is that going to create the pinch points are now going to be the timber pinch points? Where they're going from one patch to another? Are they going to change their patterns? Like JJ said, you just got to kind of wait to see. But the advantage that you have if you have your own land is now we get to leave up some crops. So we get to keep the best of both worlds in that scenario. What's that going to do? We don't know. That's never happened to us before. Well, last year we had that one little cornfield that they ate every single kernel of corn out of. But that was the only food that we had during the season.
And you could, if you don't own it and you have a lease, or if you just have permission, you could always ask the farmer. You could pay him a couple $100 to leave it outside row or something, too. So that's worked well in the past.
Yeah. Yep.
So crops coming off. Weather, obviously, from when we talked last week, drastically is changing. We went from having days in the 70s and kind of getting up into the 80s there a few days. Now, Mike, like you said, with highs coming in the 50s, the lows even dropping down in the 30s. We're October 13th as we're talking here today. You've had some new bucks show up. Where are they showing up? What types of areas are they showing up? And why do you think that is, past just the crops coming off?
Well, they're showing up where we thought they would show up, which is kind of just looking back at trail camera pictures, those main scrapes, those main bedding areas that they take over during the rut. They're checking on the doe groups, what's changed. It's kind of interesting because they're gone all year round and we make all these changes and then they come back and they got to analyze, what changed. Maybe they, 1 year we hinge cut, next year we're going to log. Crops have changed. So they're kind of coming back, just feeling out, what's going on and how am I going to use this area in a few weeks when the rut kicks in. But yeah, they're showing right back up where we thought. They kind of take, it seems like certain bucks like their own spot, like their own section of a property. And that's kind of what I've been seeing on camera too. Different bucks showing up on different spots in the property. So just like what we thought, they're showing back up. But it's mostly nocturnal right now.
Yeah.
It's just been kind of a couple scouting missions by some of the big ones, I'd call them. Walking through at night, feeling things out. Not a daylight pattern that we have yet. So really waiting on some cold weather, and later in the month is when they daylighted last year. So that's kind of what I'm waiting on.
Yeah, those young 2 and 3 year olds, and some of them that are just fantastic looking deer, up and comers. Were really kind of having their way with the property about 2-3 weeks ago, and they were showing up daylight. Of course, that's not uncommon for a 2.5 to 3.5 year old deer especially 1.5s, to show up during daylight. It's kind of normal actually, and they're the first ones out. Blah 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 blah. But when the big ones did show up, a couple things I noticed. One is we set up the property and we put the cameras in areas where we wanted them to go, where we wanted them to now be their spot to go visit. And it worked. That was cool. You know what I mean? So we put water in a certain place. We made sure that, we took out fencing areas. We had food plots and different. We did things to the property to kind of get them to do what we wanted them to do. And it worked. It really did work. Because think about that. The previous year, they were going down in only the one food plot we had down on the bottom right by the farm. And there was tons and tons of social activity there because all the does and fawns were flowing out into that area. And we had it screened off. We used Egyptian. So they, as long as there wasn't a lot of crazy stuff going on, they were comfortable coming out right at sunset. And of course, in the mornings, they were coming out there too. So it became a consistent flow with the deer early, and the bucks followed. This year, it's not that way. This year, we've got more diversity and more assets for the deer to use within the property, and we're setting it up for them to use that and putting our tree stands in areas based on the way we set it up from a strategic standpoint. And by golly, they're showing up, just like JJ said, where we wanted them to, where we thought they would. That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool to see the hard work pay off. I can remember at the beginning when you guys first bought that property and Andy Orr came up and you guys were analyzing how you were going to structure it. And, I'm trying to think of the term that he used, but it was to look at that property as
like a blank canvas.
A blank canvas, and not, look at it for what it is, but look at it like, what you can do, make the deer do what you want them to do. And now fast forward, what are we through, you guys 3 years in to this Whitetails from Scratch property. It's really cool that you guys are now seeing like, look, the deer are really not just this year, but for the past few now, historically they're doing what you want them to do. And hopefully you're going to be able to really take advantage of that come hunting season. That's the plan, right?
Yeah. I'll give it a shot here this next week or two, and then I'm actually going to pop over to Wisconsin. And I told Chris, well, you better be ready, because if nobody's hunting during that peak pre-rut window, I'm going to be mad because, Mike, Dad here, he's in the boot, so he's got limited options, and Chris is going to have the whole place to himself for at least a few days, and he better be ready.
Or there's going to be hell to pay.
I can see.
Didn't put all that work in for it not to be hunted. So.
Now, on Chris's side, I'll stick up for him a little bit. He's got to run operations here, and this is our busiest time of the year. But yeah, he's got to start getting out. He's got to start doing it. I'm with you. Now, in my case, I'm excited to get out because now I can't. The grass is always greener on the other side, whatever. If you say you can't do it, you want to do it. I can't get up in a tree stand, but there's a couple spots where I'm just about ready to hobble into the bat cave and the bat blind, whatever you want to call it, and go in there and take a layup, whatever. We got. I'm going to call
the
him,
oldest buck.
I'm going to call him 7 Up. That'll be the layup deer. So he's a 7-pointer this year. Kind of a little bully. He's got them beautiful 3-year-olds. I know he's going to boot them out of there, and we don't want them getting shot. So I'll take him out of the picture. 7-point belly up, 7 Up.
There you go.
You don't know what's going to show up, though.
But that's right, because
that's a hot spot.
That can be a hot spot.
Yeah, anything kind of happen there. Cool buck though in itself. Cool storyline behind that 7 Up buck. He's just an old kind of bruiser bully buck. That would definitely be a great one to shoot in a trophy, nonetheless, for sure. I think that's what I'm seeing too. Bucks showing up on scrapes. Definitely more different bucks that I have not seen this year showing up now, which is always exciting to see. We're getting into that time of year where, again, we kind of preluded to it last week, but getting into those social areas and new bucks showing up for the first time, putting yourself in the position to see some of that. That's exciting for sure. So trail camera wise, I know that we're moving cameras around a little bit right now, making sure that they're on those primary scrapes, finding those scrapes, finding that buck sign, because, bucks are going to start hitting those. Obviously this weekend we have cold front coming, looking for those windows. Mike, talk to me a little bit about what those windows are that we're looking for and kind of what we're going to get this weekend.
Okay, so for me, I'm more picky because remember now, I've been doing this forever. I've hunted so much throughout my lifetime and been out and studied animals for so many years, and have been so deep and intense into this type of sport. I can't really explain it, but now I'm at an age where my mindset just changes a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm not that aggressive, crazy, wild, have to be out there, more retirement type age. And I get my satisfaction out of being a part of setting things up, watching things unfold, watching JJ and Chris and watching even the pro staff and just the company, watch the success of the company. And so that's what's fulfilling me now more than having to go out and kill a big, huge deer. So I'm a lot pickier, and I don't hunt hard. I call it hunting smart, and JJ calls it being lazy. And there's a little bit of lazy along with that because I've missed some great opportunities because I didn't want to get up. He's shaking his head over there. I know. And yeah, that's just where I'm at. So my windows right now, being picky, I'm looking at the barometer. I'm looking at the weather fronts moving in. I'm looking at, cold. We want a cold snap. Okay, so we want a cold snap. We want a weather shift. I mean, we killed deer in this exact weather, Jay. Remember that one? That out at, it was the storm buck. We're not going to say where they are, okay? So it was the storm buck. I don't even remember the name of it. There's a video on it. And
The perfect storm.
The perfect storm, that was it. So we hunted the storm, the window. We checked it, and it really went down to that day. We had great weather. We kind of knew what the buck was doing. And we're like, the wind is going to shift as soon as it gets daylight. And so if we get out into that timber and we get into our tree stand and we ride the storm out, and we did, and it was a serious storm. And so we rode out the storm into the truck. Once it started to let up and we could tell the wind shift was coming in the next hour, we got out of the truck, got dressed, got into the stand, sat there, holed up, hunkered down, let the rain quit. It was still raining. And as soon as that rain quit, that wind shifted and the deer started to move. And I'll be darned if that buck didn't do exactly what we predicted. And that's a window. That's a window hunt. And I just never forget it. I mean, it just worked out the way we wanted. So that rain happened. We're all cold. And all of a sudden, finally, the rain quits. The wind shifts, and we're sitting there. Some does came, and they came in from a direction, because they have to. And when I say wind shift, the importance of that is that buck has to move. He's got to move. So he's sitting in his location based on the wind for his protection and to be hit to his advantage for survival. And so they just do it. It's their instinct. It's their survival instinct. So as soon as that wind goes in a different direction and they no longer have that advantage, they have to get up and move. And a lot of people, I don't know, that's not talked about near enough, I don't think. Because it could be a warm day, sunny day, when you think, oh, nothing's going to move, but you have a wind shift right at a peak time when deer would move in the morning or in the evening. Perfect. I mean, talk about a window. That's a great window. Well, we had it all. We had the barometer, we had the storm front, we had the wind change, and we had the time of the year. And they had just picked the corn that week. So he lost that cover. And so that gave us an idea of where his pinch points were and where his travel points were. We were sitting exactly on a scrape line in the middle of the timber, And he just went around this little patch of woods. It was like a trail around there, and he went around that trail and he hit scrapes all the way around this little timber patch. We got in there. We knew with the wind shift he would probably want to come in and bed in this one area, and he'd probably check the scrapes on the way. That's exactly what happened. So we're sitting there. Everything's perfect. The wind changes. The does come in. They're looking around. They kind of moved around, and this hunt's out there. And then we're just sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear, no, you did some calling. You did some light calling, like there was a buck checking his scrapes and his scrape line. And so then he stopped. It was blind calling. You put it away. We sat there, and it wasn't not even a minute, I don't think. And all of a sudden I hear this, and it was about probably 100 yards off, 80 yards off. I'm like, uh-oh, that's probably him. Because, you know, squirrels do, that's a great warning. So if you're ever out there and you hear a squirrel in the distance, they start doing that. Where we are, that's a good sign that squirrels don't like them bucks. I don't know why, but they don't. And so they'll start doing that. And sure as heck, after that squirrel started, sounding off, here he come, walking right down that scrape line. I'm going, here we go. So to get the camera, I think I was filming. So I get the camera on the deer. You got to watch this video. It's cool because he comes walking. He hits a scrape line. It's just soaking wet from sitting there in that wet. Gets to a little opening and he shakes off. And it's like a dog shaking after he comes out of the lake and water's flying. It was the coolest thing. And he did exactly what we expected. JJ was ready. He's watching. I'm filming. I know where the deer's going. He gets right to the scrape within 7 yards of our tree, stands there broadside, and it's game over. So that is a window hunt.
That's awesome. Lots of good tips in there. Lots of good things to pay attention to. I have a question for you. You talk about watching the barometric pressure. So is there a magic number that you're looking for? Are you looking for trend? What are you looking for when you're looking at the barometer?
I mean, I'm not an expert in that, but 30. If it's 30 and rising, you know, or if you're in the 29s and it's going to rise up into there, if you just get a good rise movement, and that's Minnesota. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country. I just know our area. JJ, maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there on it, but yeah, that 30.123, whatever the number is, just a rise in it as the temperatures are dropping. You know, that's kind of the magic formula. So keep it simple. Don't overanalyze it.
Don't overanalyze it. And also then we'll add in the moon. You know, we follow the red moon, the moon guide, Adam Hayes, and yeah, they get more active. I mean, that's something that's been used in fishing and all kinds of different things. It has to do with the gravity pull. It has nothing to do with moon phases. It's all about gravity pull. And so movement based off of that. And then, of course, you add time of the year to it and all the factors and that kind of thing. And so that's another element of a window. So I'm looking for the noted or historical times when deer will start to change their behavior. We talk about pre-rut, which is what we're getting into now. And we look at those dates and we watch our cameras. It's close now. There could be any day now. Some of them bigger bucks where we wondered where they were could daylight, or there could be a window where we could at least get our eyes on activity. It could be a good time to get out and maybe hit up one of those stands, you know, not get too intrusive with it. So those windows are coming up from that. But for me, it's going to be probably another week yet, unless I get some data saying get out there and I got these other elements, because remember, I'm getting a little lazier. And so I'm going to be out there in that key time. And so what's that, October 25th till the opening of gun season for us, which is this year, November 6th, I believe. So that 25th to the 6th, it's like, yeah, you need to be there. You just need to be there, even if all the other elements aren't there. But, you know, starting this next week, all the way into our gun season, when the human pressure just totally changes everything and makes them go nocturnal, this is it. It's happening now. So
yeah, I'm just trying to calculate right now with this cold weather coming. I mean, we've had such warm weather. Waiting for it to break. It's finally breaking, and we think the bucks are going to move. But which bucks is where my mind is. Which bucks are actually going to move? So like tomorrow, October 14th, is a 6.5-year-old buck going to move, or is it the 4-year-olds?
In daylight.
If we're going for the six, a certain buck, I'm just trying to figure out, is it worth getting into a spot? Is he going to move? He didn't, I don't have data from him last year moving that time during daylight. Doesn't mean he's not going to. I mean, we're just a week or two off from when he did. But just trying to calculate that right now. I don't want to bump it. So it's hard. It's tough when you're just going for one deer.
Yeah. I think if you're trying to relate this to your own property, I think there's a lot of variables there. I think there's obviously if you can look at historical data like you're looking at right now, I think that's great. You don't have any historical data of that deer moving in daylight, this time of year, last year or the year before. Now, that being said, when I look at a window, I try to look at all those things too. I do. But like I see it as this is really the best. I believe this weekend will be the best opportunity for, or the most favorable chance of that deer, probably a deer, 6.5-year-old caliber deer moving, so far this season. It's time of year. It's the drastic drop in temperature. I know that bucks are going to be hitting scrapes now. Mike, I agree with you that, it seems like every year around that 25th, sometimes a little earlier, 22nd, but, right around that time, I do believe that, most mature bucks will be on their feet at some point during the daylight, making their round. They're going to go and hit all their primary scrapes. They're going to leave their scent. Around that time, it's going to happen. So, yeah, in a week and a half, like here in Minnesota, here in the Midwest, be in the tree stand because, especially if we have one of those windows, cold temperatures, things like that, they're going to be on their feet. I will be hunting this weekend. I know that. I think it's going to be really good. I think everything is lining up to be pretty favorable, but that's a variable thing too. You bring up a great point. I think you have to look at it from the standpoint of how much intrusion are you going to put in there if you don't see them. So like, can you get in and out clean? I think that's something that you really have to look at. If that deer does not move, can you get out of there and exit cleanly enough where you're not going to bump them?
Hey, well,
Yep.
There you go. So that's a perfect point. So this is something that people don't really understand. I shouldn't say that. That's a pretty broad statement. That a lot of people don't pay as much attention to as you could or should, in my opinion. And that's the entrance and exit. And I learned that not from myself, but I learned that from JJ. And he puts a lot of focus on that. A lot of focus on that. Getting in and getting out. What you do. What did you do today? You went out there. We had a rain window. He got up early in the morning and he came over and dropped off the little one and ran out there before his meeting to clear a trail to a key pinch point stand that we feel that we're going to kill a big buck out of. And that was the window for that. He was hunting, but he wasn't hunting the deer. But he's preparing for that because that's the pattern where that deer is going to come, and it's going to be a pinch point, and especially when that corn comes out. That's just going to be a hot spot. I mean, we're going to kill a deer out of that area this year. There's a high probability of it, but you got to get in and out of there. You got to be able to get in and out of there without being seen, or you blow them out, and once you blow them out, you're done. Comment on that if you want, as far as...
So that's a spot. I hung that stand last year, knew it was going to be killer. I tagged out, never actually hunted it. You hunted it once or twice.
And had encounters every time I went in.
Had good hunts. We changed some stuff around there with food plots and things like that, and a water hole, so it'll act a little bit different. Now it's corn instead of beans behind the stand. But yeah, I knew I had to get a good clean trail because it was really thick, and you said you couldn't get in quiet. We got to get into this spot quiet. So this morning, big storm came through, and then we have heavy winds right now while we're doing this podcast. 20-mile-an-hour winds blowing all day and all through into tomorrow. So scent is blowing away from where the deer were. Heavy rains. Went in there with clean gear, phased out, rubber boots, and used actually the field foam before I went in and just basically took the loppers and cut every branch and moved every stick and tree out of the way that I could, and had just a real clean access now right off the corn. So a nice 30-yard entry where you won't touch anything going in, you won't break any branches. Just got right down to the dirt with that trail. And kind of one of the cool things that I did today, I've done this a lot where I normally use a hand trimmer, the little clippers. Today I used the loppers, which are like a 3-foot long extension cutter. And it was kind of cool because I could walk and cut and then grab it and with the loppers and then put it to the side. So I was walking, not touching anything with my hands. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I want to say something about this now one more time, and yeah, I can't stress this enough. The hunt that I had there, I didn't have trails, and that was last year, and my hearing's going a little bit too. So, you know, something's hitting a branch, you know, or whatever, I got to be able to hear it. But now I use these sport ears, and that makes a big difference. So I put the sport ear in, I kind of crank it up, and then all of a sudden a blue jay comes, and I about jump out of the tree stand. So now I can hear. But getting in and out of there when it's dark out, and it can last year, especially because there's a bean field, so there's no cover. And so I'm trying to slide out of there along the edge of this bean field. I'm just crack and smashing. Every single deer that was in that field feeding, I bumped. And there's not a dang thing I could do about it. Because no matter how good you think you are from a stealth, when you can't see where those dead branches are or twigs, that tiny little cracking sound, boom, them deer are at alert. They know something's coming out there. Now, sometimes you can get away with going at a certain pace and they might think that it's another deer kind of moving through there, but it's pretty easy to tell a human. And it's so important to get in and out without being seen with a cover, shield of some sort where, on your trails in and out, and silence as much as possible.
Another thing I did on the way in too is I was scouting as I went in because we don't go in these areas like ever. There was a big scrape right along the corner, inside corner of that corn where we walked by to get into the tree stand. So I actually took those loppers and cut the licking branch right off the tree because that's where our downwind side is too. So I didn't want deer just remembering this spot, going to that visual and going to that scrape. So kind of just on the fly thing that I thought was pretty cool is cut down that scrape that you don't want them to use. You know, they're going to find something else somewhere else.
Or you can make another one for them too.
And just try to get a bulletproof stand location for these next couple weeks.
It's a super interesting tactic that I don't think a lot of people think about doing. You know, they see a scrape and they're like, oh, there's a scrape. Everybody thinks about putting a mock scrape in, but I don't think a lot of people think about taking a scrape out where it's not wanted. And if there's a scrape that you think is going to impact you that is not in a negative way that you can't take advantage of from a hunting standpoint, yeah, maybe not a bad idea to kill it like you did that. That's a pretty cool tactic, I think.
Should have had a camera on it.
Yeah.
Before I did that, but
another thing maybe we can touch on, just kind of came to the top of my head. Setting the tree stand location, because we studied that for over a week, just trying to figure out, should we put it here or shouldn't? And you look at all the different variables, and JJ's really good at that. Also now we're using a new camouflage this year. And so we're going to see, how is that going to impact? What's that camouflage trying to represent? In this case, I'll let you guys talk about it. But JJ, walk us through the thought process of where you're going to put a stand, why you picked that particular tree from a physical perspective, getting in and out, to a strategic perspective and a camouflage or a concealment perspective.
Yeah, so we're testing a new camo. It's called Osseo gear, and it's actually designed, Brian's wearing it if you're watching this video, but it's designed out of an owl feather pattern, so a real natural look, and it looks pretty awesome, to be honest, and some pretty cool features with just the actual technology and pockets and things like that. But yeah, we've been using Sitka for a long time, and they make awesome gear. Their technology is great, fits great, keeps you really warm. And but we've noticed that the camouflage pattern can be hit or miss depending on the spot. And you guys know that I picked the smallest tree that I possibly not that I possibly can, but sometimes we're just limited to really small trees, and I'll hang a stand in there. And I just feel like maybe this pattern is something that can really conceal me in those situations, and just give us a little bit of an advantage. But I don't know. We're still testing it. I really like the way it looks, but it'll be interesting to see what the deer think.
It will, and what I'm seeing from a visual perspective is like my Sitka would be great for being skylined because it kind of has that lighter whites and grays of sky mixed within. This has some shades of that, but I think it's more designed like if you see an owl, in the woods. I mean, like you could be like right next to it, and oh, sheesh, there's an owl there. You didn't even see it getting into your tree, and I think that's because it's a visual of like almost the background rather than a foreground. You know what I mean? And so I'm wondering if maybe you'll just kind of like melt away within the natural, timber, if you will. So it's kind of it's cool. I'm excited to test it too. And the technology, I mean, I haven't worn it yet. I don't know. I'll compare it because Sitka is really good. But I mean, looking at what they've done with this and with, wind is huge. And they're really focusing on making sure that you're not getting penetrated by wind and still being able to, be comfortable and light. It's definitely less bulky, I think.
Yeah, it's wind cut technology with, I don't remember what they call the fleece on the inside, but it should keep you pretty warm. And again, we're not paid to say this or anything. This is something we're testing because we're really interested in it and excited to use it. I know I've been picked off many a time in the tree, and hopefully we lower those odds this year, but we'll see,
So
we're gonna give an honest opinion on it. We're not gonna
that's the way, and that's how I designed that's how my company became itself. Is I used to have a guide service, and I would say, all right, guys, take this. And if they destroyed it and didn't use it again, then it wasn't a good product. But if they used it all the time, then I knew, hey, that's the real deal. So I took that mentality with every product I designed through Illusion and got it into the hands of the best hardcore. Opinionated might be a little strong, but I mean, when you do something and you're successful at it and it works, you do not like change. And so you get it into people's hands like that are very successful, get their honest feedback, and you can't get all butthurt if they say, well, this is no good and that. You make your changes, figure it out. That's what we're doing with other people's products now too.
And I don't like change, by the way.
And JJ don't like
but
change.
I saw Joe Miles is the owner of this company. He did a lot of work with Adam Hayes of the Moon Guide, so we knew Joe. He's been on Deer Society episodes and filmed for us in the past. But I've been seeing him, come out with this camouflage. The line has expanded. Got some, early season, mid season, late season, and I've just been kind of keeping an eye on it for a while and connected with Joe, and we're gonna give it a shot. I think I'm excited.
Yeah. So back to how you setting up picking out the tree.
Well, I actually learned this from Rod, kind of going through his boot camp over a decade ago down in Iowa. But he would walk around the tree, and don't do this if you can during the season, if at all possible. Spring is best, early spring when you can see everything in the sky. But walk around your tree, walk the deer trails, see what's skylined, because skyline is if you're silhouetted up in the tree, there's no backdrop, there's nothing to break up your outline. That's going to absolutely kill you. So, deer have their eyes on the sides of their head, so when they're walking, they can see you on the side. So if you're walking the trails, kind of pick out your tree and just keep looking up at it, from different directions, different angles, and then you'll know if it's a good tree to jump up in, or if it's going to be one that you're going to get busted in.
Because why? Because you want stuff in front of you, or you
want a lot of stuff behind you if possible, and a little bit in front of you. But you want a tree that's just not, a telephone pole with just blue sky behind you completely. So as much breakup as possible is good. And I'm not going to say I don't pick trees that are not skyline, because I do pick trees that are skyline, but it's typically where I only have that option or I can't hunt there at all. So.
And you're pretty much sure that the deer's going to come in a direction where he's not going to be
out in front of you,
worst part of the skyline area. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, we could talk about, sitting in a perfect tree. Sometimes you got to deal, play with the cards you're dealt, picking a tree, and you don't always have the perfect one. But yeah, if you can get one with back cover, for sure, that's ideal. And like Mike, I think you alluded to, and JJ, I know you paid attention to it when you're in there hanging. Access is, again, key, being be concealed when you're up there, but you got to make sure you're concealed on your way in and your way out, and trying not to cross deer trails and paying attention to spots where you can slip in and have the wind in your advantage, where you're not bumping deer before you get in or bumping them after you leave. I think is all key stuff when you're looking for a tree stand placement tree. So we're running out of time here, but I want to talk about before we go, how your calling techniques are changing now from early season. So kind of through the early season, went through that early October period. Now October 13th, we're not quite the pre-rut yet, but it's coming quick. How is your calling changing? What are you looking to do from a calling standpoint here in the coming weeks?
Well, you want to go, Jay?
Yeah, I'll just give a brief summary of what I would think or do, and then you actually have a call here. You can break down some scenarios, but kind of just keep it simple. I mean, do what the deer are doing, and if you're watching them on camera or you're scouting, you're seeing them spar. Like Brian, you've been out hunting quite a bit, and you've seen the small bucks sparring. I'm sure they're grunting a little bit. It's pretty low key. We're not full on battle mode. Does aren't long estrus bleats quite yet. Save your bag of tricks for that time of the year, but you definitely call them in. Their testosterone levels these bucks are increasing right now. Scrapes are being opened up. Their necks are just swelling up, and they're gaining a lot of weight. So they're pretty aggressive right now. But still, just keep it low key and be patient.
Yeah, you nailed it perfectly, and that's the the big view. So do what the deer are doing was the perfect statement. Okay, so we're still seeing on camera the small ones are still sparring a little bit more aggressively, maybe, but they're not battling by any means. I mean, the little deer don't try and kill each other for a doe anyway. The big bucks and the moderate, the 3, 4. I haven't seen any 3 and 4s go at it yet on camera. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen any moment now, any day now, any week now. The big boys aren't going to really care at this point in time unless a little guy actually really ticks him off. He'll let him have it. But right now, it's more about who's here. So from a more detailed perspective and strategy, I would say play the who's here game. Okay? Curiosity. Who's here? Who's here? I'm not challenging. I'm not trying to draw you in as a sexy doe. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just like, who's here? Make them wonder who's here. And do it more that way, which is simple contact grunts, light tickling of the rattling. You first sit of the year that one time he did the tickle, he had to find out who's here. What buck was that? That was double split. So perfect example. Watch the double split, and I think we just recycled that this week, didn't we?
Yep, we did, and we talked about that a little bit on that last podcast, early season.
Yep.
Tactics.
So watch double split, recycled. That's this time of the year. I'm going to just do contact grunts, to be honest with you. Just simple grunting. I got a call here with me. And I'm going to talk a little bit about technique here when it comes to the deer call itself. So I just grabbed this call out of my desk. I'm assuming it works if it was in my desk.
The extinguisher deer call, by the way.
The extinguisher.
Also,
Who invented that call?
I don't know. It came to a guy in his dream.
Also, if you're watching, you're about to see what would basically also double as Ron Burgundy on his flute here. So get ready. Here we go.
That was the greatest video I've ever seen in my life. So if you just take the deer call itself, you got to remember it's a musical instrument. So if you just take the deer call and you just blow air through it, it's going to sound like this. I have the extinguisher in the buck setting. Okay, that's what it sounds like. Now, if you want to sound like a deer, create the illusion, if you will, you want to actually play this instrument. And in this particular case, I'm going to put my hand over it. I'm going to do some cupping, and I'm going to control the air, not just with my throat and my tongue. I'm going to control it with my chest, open up my throat, open up the variable air chamber, if you will, within my mouth, and that changes tones. And once you start to learn how that works, like I'll just start out with doing the exact same note. That's basically a contact grunt, okay? Now I'm going to give it a little bit of cupping. That's the exact same thing I did before I just cupped it. So I got a different sound to it. Now I want to do a little bit more of a sounding like a deer. Now I'm trying to think like a deer, and JJ said, do what they're doing. Listen to them. Listen to them and see if you can make that exact same sound. Okay? Because that's how I designed the call. So you get that exact same sound. So now I'm going to go through and maybe I hear a deer going. All those variations, all those different tones and volumes. But when it comes to a contact grunt, I'm always going to point it away from the deer. And I'm going to point it toward the ground so they don't understand it's coming from the sky up in the tree stand. And I'm going to put it in an area where I want them to go look and find. So think about the sound waves. How are they traveling out where I'm pointing this? Maybe I got to use my body as a shield. Maybe I use the back of the tree as a shield. But point that call where you want that deer to go look. Okay? So in a contact grunt now, if I saw a deer, I'd be looking over to my left shoulder. If you're watching this on video, it'd be like, I see the deer over here, I'd go, just like that. And all I did was go, where? I just built up a little bit of tone variation. It's a real short call. So that's about all I would really be doing right now. Doe bleats, I wouldn't really be calling much as a doe right now. What I would be doing more of would be a young doe or a fawn, just because they're still kind of hanging with mom and they're still a little emotional and they're kind of breaking up, but they're not breaking up, and they are and they aren't. And you'll see like little button bucks and stuff when they start pushing them away. They'll just be sitting in the woods walking around. They'll just be doing some calling, and they'll just because they're lonely or missing or whatever. But the moms are still attached to those fawns emotionally. Okay, so it's like your toddler kid gets in trouble and you hear the scream, boom, parental instinct comes, and that's 60% of the time, all the time, Ron Burgundy video. That was awesome, by the way. If you haven't seen that, you got to look for it. So I would use my fawn, so I just run it all the way up to the top of the doe into the fawn area and just kind of do a... So I do it short, okay? And I would try and keep the volume down on it. And once again, it's more important, especially when you're doing this. What I'm trying to do in this scenario is to get a doe to come over. And so if I can get some doe scent in my area, or if I can get a doe to be in this area, or if I can have a buck in the area thinking there's does and fawns around, it's probably going to draw more of your 2.5 to 3.5-year-old deer to see if there's doe activity. And you could throw a doe sound in there as to the mom calling back, because does will assemble in the evening. So when they start to come out into these open areas and start to feed, or coming into a feed area, the boss doe, she'll go out and she'll do kind of an assembly doe bleat, which is just basically a doe bleat. It's not long, it's not emotional, it's not much. You can make it a little bit deeper, an older doe. And I'm just opening it up and I'm just closing my hand down. But this is all part instruction, but I'm trying to sound like that doe. So that's about all I'm going to do, along with tickling. So when it comes to the fawn, you can change that. If you can get the volume down and get a little bit higher, you can do it with the call, but you got to kind of really work the call a little bit and to get that sound. But that's really distinguishes the fawn from the doe. So what I'll do in this particular one is I'll try and get it as quiet as possible, and I pinched way down on the amount of air going into the call and try to put the least amount of sound into it. And I'm actually cupping and muffling the sound a little more too. That's about as soft as you can get, but that's a natural light fawn just saying, hey mom, I'm over here. You know what I mean? So they'll just go just like that. That's exactly how it sounds. I mean, exactly. And they're doing that a lot this time of the year. So that's when I would use the fawn. I'd do something like that, saying, oh, okay, we're starting to come out. We're starting to assemble. Maybe I do a doe bleat assembly like I did earlier. And if I wanted to kill a doe, I would just do that fawn thing when they're out in the open and they don't see a fawn. and I would do it more distressful, and I'd point it into an area that's like a low, could be like a troublesome area for the fawn, like say I'm in a ravine is close by, or a deadfall, and I would act like I'm in trouble, and I'd be like, see how I put that emotional inflection in there? And you only do it like once or twice, and as soon as that doe pops her head, she'll be staring like, what? And then she'll be like, well, no, it's probably fine. She might go down and start feeding again. Don't call while she's looking at you or being at alert. Sometimes she'll put her head down, she'll eat, and she'll pop it up again without you even calling, just to find out what's going on. So just, hey, these are just things you'll learn. Do what the deer do. But there's some tips for you. I could go on forever.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, keeping it pretty basic right now. Maybe the next podcast we can hit some more advanced calling or more aggressive calling tactics. Some other things that I was thinking about while you were talking about calling is we're just starting to introduce some scents to the woods too. At least I am. I'm gonna head to Wisconsin, put out some raw scents. We're working with raw, getting some of their frozen scents, which I think are the best. They're fresh, they're frozen, and you put them right out in the field. So some of that type of scent, not any estrus stuff yet. Doing some buck scents on the scrapes, just kind of activating those, putting cameras up, watching the reveals, and then washing this new Osseo gear. That's kind of what I got going on tonight. I'll wash that, the new backpack, and hopefully by tomorrow, ready to jump up in a stand. Hit Minnesota this weekend, hit Wisconsin, and we'll see if some big bucks are on the move.
Let's make a quick comment on the scent thing. When it comes
I
to...
do have a tip on that too. Yeah, go.
Okay, yeah. When there's... The way I look at scent, especially this time of the year, is we've noticed that the deer are coming in and they're starting to make the scrapes. They're starting to go, they wouldn't go to the water hole until they could smell, oh yeah, it's natural, there's deer there. So you want that natural smell of a deer. And we've used different things, and raw is obviously going to be a natural because it's flash frozen. It doesn't have the bacteria, rotten, stinky smell built up into it. It's not all dark black. It's clear urine. And so you use that fresh. You don't have to go crazy with it, but when you're adding deer activity to an area, you're going to see deer feel more comfortable. And that's kind of my point I wanted to get across. This is about making deer feel comfortable to be in an area and do it in a natural way. Don't go crazy with it.
Yeah, and don't blow out an area just to get scent into a spot. Like, don't go into your core bedding area just to get scent on a scrape, Be smart. Phase out, like I did this morning, hanging the tree stands. I was scent-free, phased out. I was going to make a comment about washing the new Osseo gear. I know my washer and dryer has got a little bit funky the past month or so. And one thing that I did, and that's because with all the kids, they got a lot of dirty clothes going in there. But
human odor.
we'll keep it at that. One thing I did do, which I think worked really well to kind of flush the whole system, is I did a load of whites, towels, and sheets, and did bleach. Ran a load of bleach through there, and that just completely killed off all that bacteria and mold. And, I don't know what's in there, but a lot of dirt. And then I run a couple cycles and with the phase, socks, liners, base layers, whatever it may be. Then I'm going to go through exterior gear, final wash, and ideally you have a week to let it kind of air outside. In our case, not tomorrow, probably that won't be the case, but that's kind of a little tip. If somebody has some scent in their washer or dryer, they really need to flush out that bleach. Clorox bleach worked pretty well. Don't use it on your camo.
Yeah, and if you have like volumes of clothes, like different layers for different times and all that, and your orange vest or whatever it is you need to prep up now and you're getting prepped up, store them obviously in airlock type containers. We use plastic bins, and
which we wash out with phase.
And what I'll do is I'll crack the tops on that a little bit. You know what I mean? And then we have our own bags too that we use for a daily. Everything's hanging up on the line if it's not going to rain or snow overnight for nights, many nights. And then we put them in the bag before we leave. That's what I do. Wash out your pickup bed. You can use phase with that. You can either use the laundry detergent or any of the soaps that'll foam up. We're working on something with that more of a It's really just the technology of the phase that you want to get there. So it's going to take out all them organic odors. But deer are just so sensitive to the human odor. And I just can't, stress that enough. And the whole design and the whole purpose behind phase is to get rid of the human element in your hunting scenario. If they do not know there's a human in that hunting scenario and you do your regular, and I'm talking regular, scent control regimen, but you add that element of the phase system that removes the human from your hunt, I guarantee you are going to see more deer. And the reason I can do that is because you just see more deer. It just happens. If you don't like it, whatever, we'll give you your money back. We don't care. It absolutely is the most important thing, is to keep that human identity out of the area. Because even if you bump a deer and then they go back, but they don't tell that there's a human presence there, they're still okay. But if they know it's a human that's been there when you bump that deer, you're done.
Or if they can find your stand.
Right. That you're burning out the stand. Right.
Well, lots of good stuff there. Obviously, exciting time of year. Starting to get into that point where you can get a little more aggressive. Start, listen to what the deer are doing. Be able to implement your calling a little bit lightly as we start extinguisher, black rack. Maybe do some tickling, but do what the deer are doing. Start thinking about maybe getting a little more aggressive here in the coming weeks. But again, key right now, hunt smarter, not necessarily harder. Do your scouting, let your cameras, let your reveals give you the intel. But get excited. It's that good time of year. Hopefully, watching the Deer Society pages, we're going to be posting lots on there. Hopefully some success photos coming up. New hunt breakdown every Monday, still releasing really good content coming up. Lots already over the past few weeks, but more good stuff coming. If you're watching, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Thanks for listening. Download the Deer Society app. There's instructionals on there from Mike going through calling all the way through the season, different times of the year, different inflections, how to communicate with these deer. And hey, we're here to make you more successful. We're not trying to shove anything down your throat. We're giving you the tools that we use and these guys are using to be successful, and hopefully you can implement some of those into your game. So thanks for listening, and we'll keep you updated here. Thanks, guys.
Well,